all sins are weighed equal in the eyes of God is a complete and total myth and is not true, and I'm about to show you why. As always, my works cited for this video is just this, because this is the only source we need to prove anything true or false. Let's start out with what is true and what people might confuse with this myth. In Romans, it says that the wages of sin is death. That is true. The wages of all sin is death. Another thing that is true is that all sin does separate us from God. Isaiah 59 verse 2 tells us this outright. It is also true that God cannot be around any type of sin, that all sin does separate us, as I just said. As Isaiah 64 verse 6 says that every single work in our lives, including our good and bad deeds, are just like dirty rags in the eyes of God. So all these things are true. Every sin, whether it's stealing a candy bar or mass genocide, is a separation from God. What I'm talking about is the myth that the scale of this separation is equal. You see, we are bound by a law. We have a lawgiver, which is God. These laws are written out for us in the Bible, in Leviticus, Deuteronomy. We have new covenant laws, which are reaffirmed either from Leviticus by Jesus himself or Paul in the epistles. A lot of people like to think, Leviticus and Deuteronomy pass away with the new covenant, but this is not true. In Romans, Paul writes, we are not justified by the old law, but should we then do away with it? May it never be that we uphold it instead. Being that we are under a law, we can parallel this with our worldly laws today. Whether you steal from a grocery store or you kill someone, obviously the scale is different, but you have inherently broken the law either way. So it is with God. James 2:10 says that we are all guilty when we sin and that we have all broken the law when we do so. I can steal, I can lie, or I can kill. I am separated from him either way, but, the scale of the atrocities that I've committed is very different. Now, if you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. Let's listen to Jesus' own words. In the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 11, Jesus is talking to Pilate, who he's been handed over to by Jesus and, the Pharisees of Jerusalem. And he outright says that, Pilate, you are condemning me to death, but this is Jesus' own words when talking about Judas. The one who has handed me over to you has the greater sin. This is Jesus just blatantly saying that some sins carry greater, baggage than others. Let's back this up with another quote from Jesus himself. In the Gospel of Luke's account of the Sermon on the Mount, we get a passage of Jesus talking about different punishments for different servants. Obviously, this is a parable or a parallel between how we are to act to God's will and how a servant acts to his master's will. Jesus says that the servant that knows his master's will and disobeys receives a greater beating than a servant who does not know his master's will and obviously disobeys the will that he was not aware of. Now, both receive a beating, but one receives a greater beating because he knew the will and disobeyed it anyway. Now, if there are any Catholics in the comments that want to talk about, invincible ignorance, we can get into that in another video. But, after this parable, he says, to everyone that is entrusted something, a greater responsibility comes upon him as well. We know the will of God. We have the Bible. We should read it, and we should act accordingly. We're not going to be perfect because we're not Jesus, but we should try anyway. Because disobedience of knowing the Bible comes with, higher punishment. If anyone's wondering if all sins are weighed equal in the eyes of God, because that's what you had heard in church or Sunday school or something, it's not true. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but the truth should prevail. Thank you for watching, and if you get the chance, repent.